Would you please welcome from For Women Scotland, Susan Smith.
I hope you're not all terribly disappointed because I really haven't had any time. This is my speech. Few scrawled notes. It's a bit of a wing and a prayer, but I think even flying blind as I am, I'm probably still more prepared than Keith Brown was this week. So, update on the bill. Where are we now? Well, I think some of you were obviously there back in December on those very dark, cold, miserable days. And I would say that if a week is a long time in politics, a month and a bit has been an epoch. Because what has happened since that bill was passed has been unprecedented. And a lot of it is due to so many of the people here today. So I really want to say thank you all very much for your work, for being on stalls, rain, shine, for writing to MSPs, and just for being the most amazing people that you are. So thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. So, the bill. I mean, this is probably, the Scottish Parliament has a pretty solid history of passing some ropey bits of legislation. We think of the triumph that was named person and offensive behaviour at Football Act. But I think they really surpassed themselves with this one. The most consulted upon piece of legislation ever. It's so consulted upon that some of the fundamental bits of it, they were completely taken by surprise when they found out that they, A, interfered with the Equality Act, and B, were wide open to abuse. If only someone had told them that, right? I mean, the process was abysmal. I've seen a class of 7-year-olds come to a more informed decision on something. But then, you know, that is probably crediting people like Karen Adam and Maggie Chapman with a degree of intelligence that they potentially don't possess. They're really going to hate me now, aren't they? I think they already hate me, so I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it. But it's also highlighted the issue of lobbyists, because what we have had in this process was law made not by politicians, not informed by civil servants, but written and advised on by a group of people who should not have that power. They are not elected, and they are not accountable. And they have been in there for years, whispering in the ears of ministers and civil servants and telling them that this was the next great thing to do, and they got them trapped. And now they're appealed to as the experts. Oh, well, these women's organisations who we fund could see no problem with our law. How strange. How completely unpredictable was that? But then, of course, as Susan said, Haldane happened. And I know it's not great, the idea that a GRC changes a person's legal sex for all purposes under the Equality Act. I know that's not great. But it was a calculated decision on our part because it was a potential outcome. And, you know, the Scottish Government, they really need better advisors because they walked straight into that. They could, and they probably should have said when they lost the last JR, okay, you know what, we'll just scrap this guidance. We'll just have women in there. I mean, it would have left it vague, but they had to do as they were told by Tim or Vic or James or whoever's currently pulling their strings. And so they had to go away and write in that it included people with a GRC, men with a GRC who identify as women. And so what they did, they then put themselves in a position of having to make the argument that people with a GRC were to be treated differently from trans-identified people who do not have a GRC, and they were also going to have to go in and argue that a GRC impacts the Equality Act. And this widening of the pool was exactly what the E8RC told them back in February last year was the issue with their bill. So by doing that, they effectively made Alistair Jack's position easy. They gave him the rationale, they opened the door and said, here it is. Now, Haldane is still potentially open for appeal, so who knows what will happen.
Well, you might.
Sorry?
You might,
I've been told not to laugh as well, sorry. Apparently my laugh has a reputation now. So this unprecedented Section 35 that I think put many people in this thoroughly weird position where I have probably never seen so many people from so many different political backgrounds so delighted that a Westminster government had interfered to overthrow a law made in Holyrood. I think it's been a quite extraordinary moment, and I think that, in and of itself, should have told some of the SNP what a mess they've made of it. Because, you know, I want a competent Scottish government. I think most people here want a competent Scottish government. We want to know we are being governed by people who are intelligent and responsible and do things properly, and not a bunch of idiots. But even then, I think some of this would have maybe not been quite so powerful without, as Susan said, the vision in fluffy pink with the acrylic nails and the synthetic wig that really, really meant he needs to stay away from open fires. Adam Graham. God love him. It's probably no one else does. But when we have a First Minister saying that she does not have enough information to determine whether a man who raped with his or her penis 2 women and has fathered children is a man or a woman, I think the next question is, First Minister, can we have some clarity on which is your arse and which is your elbow? But there's a serious point there, because we've actually got quite a lot of info on Adam Graham. We know he raped 2 women. We know he has children. We know he's been married. We know his wife thinks he's, a estranged wife thinks he's making it all up. And we also know that he went on a beauty course with a bunch of teenage girls who had to strip down to their undies in front of him. We know all of this about him, and that's a damn sight more than the Registrar General would have known had Adam gone in front of him or her 3 years ago and asked for a GRC under the sort of rules that the Parliament passed. So why is it that the First Minister needs more info on double rapist Adam Graham, but that information is not something that is required, according to their process, for a person to legally change their sex? And I know you can't change sex, but we are talking about what what is potentially the result of this as a result of holding. So yeah, the First Minister wants for herself a degree of flexibility that she would not have allowed any other woman in Scotland. And, we shouldn't have to wait for someone to commit rape or be convicted of rape before we decide whether they are male, female, or the mythical third gender that now exists in Scotland, rapist. And I don't know whether one can identify into or out of that either. Presumably. We shouldn't have to wait for that because, frankly, those girls in that college in Ayrshire should not have felt pressured to be in that position, and they should have felt that if they'd have gone to someone in the college, they would have supported them if they'd have complained about that person looking at them. And that's the issue. That is what women are now having to deal with. There should be none of these people in women's prisons. Scottish trans like to conjure up the idea of the 20-year transitioned transsexual who's lived a blameless existence and then got locked up for financial fraud. There's no one like that in Scottish prisons. They're there for murder, they're there for torture, of the people who currently identify as trans. And they're there for biting prison guards. All sorts of things. And Andrew Burns, as Susan said, has been demanding to be searched by female officers. And the female officers have been told that if they don't want to search this person, they have to put their objections in writing. And many of the more experienced ones are refusing to search, and it is then falling to the younger staff or the probationers to do this. So even if they're not in women's prisons, these robust policies that the Scottish Prison Service apparently have is failing women. And, I don't know, what could be the appeal? Why is it that 2 rapists in the last month have suddenly decided they want to identify as women? 2 other rapists, apart from Graham. Even if they don't get moved, well, they can get some young probation prison officer to come and cop a feel. What could possibly be the appeal in that for a sex offender? So I don't know whether Rapist Gate will bring down this policy. It should, because this policy is a perfect example of self-ID. Those women in prison are part of a live experiment. An experiment that goes against the Mandela rules, that goes against the Geneva Convention, that goes against everything we know or should hold dear to with human rights. So I don't know whether it will bring them down, but it should. It should bring this whole thing crashing down, and it should keep the First Minister awake at night, because this is her legacy. She wants this to be her legacy. Well, let's make damn sure it is her legacy. So what do we need? As Susan said, we need clarity. We need clarity on the Equality Act. Sign the petition. We need clarity as well on the GRA. We want Section 9 re-looked at. We need to know that it doesn't change a person's sex, as is written in there. It changes something else, their gender. They can have a gender marker. I don't care if they want to put male, female, fairy, unicorn, whatever. They can have their gender marker, but they cannot take women's spaces. They cannot take our places. Mary Wollstonecraft was cited earlier by Marina, but she said, women don't want power over men, they want power over themselves. And here we are nearly 200 years later, asking them for the same thing. Power over ourselves, power over our boundaries. It's also 200 years since Elizabeth Fry's Jails Act, which said that male and female should be kept separate. I don't want to go backwards. I don't think anybody else does. So sign that petition. Keep on to your MSPs. Keep telling them. Keep pointing things out, because they're going around with their eyes and ears shut, and they need to wake up. And I can't think of anybody better than all of you to do it, because when we started, I could never have imagined that all of you would be here today in Alloa. There's a bit of competition down in London as well. And here you all are. And this is it's a horrible time in many ways. As J.K. Rowling said, it's one of the most misogynistic periods. It's deeply depressing that some of our governments seem to exist in such a privileged little cocoon that they cannot imagine that bad men will do bad things. But it's also been incredibly inspiring to see how many women have rediscovered a passion and their power. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you for that, and we'll keep fighting and we will win this. Thank you.
Susan, I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone in this room when we say thank you.
I think on behalf of everybody in this room and way beyond, if it hadn't been for Susan, for Marion and for Trina, then I don't think we would have been here today, because they